Good evening. Tonight I'm going to tell the tale of 40 fortunes. Once upon a time, in the city of Isfahan, there lived a man named Ahmed and his wife Jamel. Ahmed did not have much, and he had a shovel and a pick. He often told his wife that if he can dig a hole, he can earn enough to stay alive, and for him that was okay. For her, it wasn't that great. She often went to the market to go to the public pool and gossip with all the women. One day, she went to the public bath and she was stopped at the front door. She was very frustrated and couldn't understand why. The lady told her that the king's minister's wife had bought the whole place out for the day. She was very upset and said, "Who does she think she is, just because her husband is a fortune teller?" She stormed off home very upset. That night, Ahmed came home with his earnings for the day and gave them to Jamel. In her hand, she held the coins and said, "What is this chump change? If you want to keep me around, you have to go and be a fortune teller in the market tomorrow." Ahmed said, "What are you talking about? I know nothing about fortune telling." She said, "It'll be fine. All you have to do is roll some dice and say something that sounds wise." So, in order to keep his wife, Ahmed sold his shovel and his pick and bought a robe and some dice. The next day, he went to the market. He didn't sit out there long before a woman came up and said, "Diviner, diviner, please help me. I lost my ring in the pool and I have no idea where it is." Ahmed had no idea what to say, so he shook the dice anxiously, trying to think of something, and he noticed there was a hole in her coat. Now, for respectable women in this culture, you are not allowed to show any kind of skin. So Ahmed leaned forward and said, "Miss, there's a hole." She said, "What?" And he said, "A hole, a hole." And she was like, "Oh yeah." And she ran back to the pool and remembered she put her ring in a hole in the wall to keep it safe. She was so excited that she ran back to Ahmed and paid him a gold coin. Ahmed later on went home to Jamel and showed her what he had got. She said, "See, I told you it's easy." And he said, "Well, I just got lucky. I can't do it again." Jamel said, "Well, in order to keep me and not have me leave you to go home to my parents, you're going to do it again." That night at the king's palace, 40 hands stole 40 cases of treasure. The next morning, the king found out. The king was so upset, he went to his diviner and asked him and his assistants to find the treasure. None of them had any answers for him, so then he threw them all in prison and called them frauds. He had heard about Ahmed and the minister's wife the other day, so he sent 2 guards to go find him. Ahmed was shaking in his boots and went up to the king. The king said, "My treasure was stolen last night, 40 cases of it. What can you tell me about the thieves?" Ahmed had no idea what to say, but came up quickly with saying, "Well, I can tell you there were 40 thieves." The king was so excited and said, "You're amazing. No one else could tell me this answer. I need you to find my treasure and the thieves." And Ahmed had no idea how he was going to do that, pondered what to do, and then said, "Well, that's going to take some time." The king said, "How much time?" Ahmed said, "Well, about 40 days, 1 day for each thief." The king said, "That's a lot of time, but if you do it, I will reward you and you will become rich. If you fail, you will go to prison with the rest of them." Ahmed took this news home to Jamel and said, Look at what you have done. I have no idea how I'm going to get the treasure." She, however, was very nonchalant and said, "Just do what you did with the lady the other day. Roll some dice and say something wise." Ahmed was very worried, so he put 40 dates in a jar and told Jamel, "I'm going to eat each date for each day that passes for a countdown for the days that I have left." It just so happened that one of the king's guards actually was a thief, and he ran to the chief of thieves and told him what he had heard the king say to Amid. The chief of the thieves did not believe him very well, but he said, well, he might be bluffing, but just in case, go and spy on him and see what he has to say. That night, the thief climbed up onto the flat roof of Jamel and Amid's home and listened in to what they were saying. Amid took a bite of the date and said, that's one. The thief was so stunned that he almost fell off the roof and ran back to the chief of thieves. Then, the chief of thieves still was kind of not really believing him and sent him back the next night with another thief. It went on 3, 4, 5, all the way up to the 40th night, where the chief of thieves decided, I'm just going to go with you guys and see what you're talking about. On the 40th night, Jamel came up to Amid and said, I am so sorry. I realized the last 40 days that I got you into all this trouble. And now you're about to go to prison. Amid said, well, I'm sorry too, because I shouldn't have done something I didn't believe in. He took a bite of his last date, and right then he heard a knock on the door. He was like, oh, great, here they are. The king's men are here to take me. He comes to the door and says, all right, I know what you're here for. And he opens it. To his surprise, he sees 40 men bowing down and all looking towards him. He realizes that it's all 40 of the thieves. The chief of thieves says, of course you know it's us, because you're the best divine there is. That night, Amid tells the chief of thieves that he has to return all the treasure in order not to turn him in. So, all the thieves take all the treasure back. The next morning, Amid goes to the king and says, I can either give you the thieves or I can give you the treasure. Which do you prefer? The king says, well, I had a boiling pot ready for the thieves, but I would really take the treasure. Amid waves his hands in the air and says, wish wash, pish posh, splish splash. And there, your treasure is back to where it belongs. Amid and the king went to the treasure room, and it was all there. The king was so excited, he said, thank you so much. You are going to be my royal diviner for the rest of your life. Amid said, thank you, but I have to decline. Looking for your treasure burnt out all my powers, and now I cannot tell the future anymore. The king felt so bad that he rewarded Amid double. He gave him 2 treasure chests. That night, Amid went home safe, rich, and a whole lot wiser. And as any fortune teller could say, they lived happily ever after. Thank you.